Hi there. I'm Chris Marion, and you're listening to the Queen Bee Sessions, conversations with Wisconsin women in conservation. We're here to tell stories about all the good work being done to protect soil, water, and wildlife by Wisconsin women. We hope these stories encourage you in your own efforts to nurture land and yourself. Today, it's my great pleasure to be talking to Lauren Langworthy. She is a good friend. She is a fellow Farmers Union employee, and she's a conservation coach with Wisconsin Women in Conservation. She's also a first-generation farmer practicing regenerative agriculture in Wheeler at Blue Ox Farm with her husband, Caleb. Welcome to the Queen Bee Sessions, Lauren.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I'm excited for our chat today.
You are most certainly a Wisconsin queen bee. You have done so many things to help the cause of regenerative ag, of organic agriculture, and lifting up and mentoring people who are on the journey in that direction. You have been the executive director at Moses, now called Marble Seed, and you're now the special projects director with Wisconsin Farmers Union. Thanks for all of this great work. How did you get in this space in the first place?
Oh, they're always fun stories, aren't they? I think every one of us is walking around with a wild story and we don't even think about how wild it is. Um, so I entered agriculture largely because my partner was very interested in agriculture and I was interested in more the conservation and wildlife component. So it's been a fun journey for us.
Well, I introduced you as a regenerative agriculturalist, and I think you are, but you call yourself a grass farmer. Tell us what that's all about.
Yeah, we often describe our farm as a grass farm, largely because that's really the main crop that we're growing. That is the crop that is supporting all of the other life on our farm. And if we manage our grassland really well, our pastures really well, then we also have fun benefits like grassland birds and pollinators and all sorts of other wild things. It provides water quality support to our community to have all that good grass and perennial cover. So that's really the focus of our farm in a lot of ways. And the animals help us manage that grass and that soil really well. And they also offer us, the benefits of some products as well.
Well, I think your grandparents farmed. Is that right?
Yeah. My grandparents on my maternal side were the last generation to farm in my family. And we talk about it skipping a generation as my mom's generation left the farm and went and did other things. And I can't say that I really plan to come back to the farm necessarily, but I always love spending time on my grandparents' farm. And when Caleb and I decided to do this work, I was excited to have that time out in nature again. Although I don't know that I fully understood what I was getting into when we first started down this path.
So you're raising sheep on grass and you're raising cattle on grass. How did you learn about animals? Were your grandparents raising animals? How did you learn about livestock?
Yeah, my grandparents, they raised cattle primarily and also crops down in South Central Minnesota. And my grandpa and his brother ran a trucking business as well. So lots of ingenuity and creative people that I come from. But we actually got started in vegetables when Caleb and I started our operation. So he had been studying vegetables and doing apprenticeships and working on many other people's farms for about 10 years prior to us starting our operation. And that was honestly a really easy access point for us. We were able to work with someone who owned land and work with 2 acres of theirs. And part of that agreement was that we would take care of their livestock while we were on that farm. And so we turned 2 acres of hayfield into a successful vegetable enterprise in a 1 year span while also managing their livestock. And that gave us the marketplace and everything to really run with our business and ultimately to access our own land. And in the meantime, I developed a real love of animal agriculture and working with pastures.
Wow, that sounds like an amazing lot of hard work, though. I
Yeah.
I have done organic vegetables, and that is no small feat. And taking care of someone else's livestock, breaking ground, breaking a hayfield to start veggies, and then building a market. That's amazing, Lauren. You,
Yeah, it was a lot. It was definitely a lot. I don't necessarily recommend our pathway to other people. We got married and moved right onto this rental farm, and it was a lot all at once. But I do think we often don't acknowledge what we're capable of. We don't see our own potential and our own power. I kind of thought I would go live on this farm and continue the art business that I was running at the time, and just like live on a farm. And I didn't realize maybe everything that it was going to require from us and how much it would really draw me in. So I think we can't always see the path ahead, but when we're open to things, we find our place in that story.
wow, that's really incredible. So you come from an art background?
Yeah, well, I I laugh that I've been a lot of things, and not all of them were actually none of them have been lucrative. I'll just start there. But yeah, I studied anthropology and art in college, and did some community outreach work prior to starting our farm. And then several years into Caleb and I farming full time together and getting this operation up off the ground, moving from the rented land to our purchase land and getting all of that infrastructure set up. I was feeling called to do some other things as well, and the off farm income never hurts, especially when you are kind of stepping in as a first generation farmer. So um, that's when I started working at Moses, now Marble Seed, and wore a lot of different hats there, and eventually joined the board of Wisconsin Farmers Union as a member, and then eventually joined the staff of the organization as well. So there, yeah, it's a long and sordid story. But again, I think each of us has a lot of different skills, and we can pull forward different pieces of ourselves depending on what's needed at the moment.
Well, I really love following you on your social media. I mean, Blue Ox Farm always has great photos of lambs and and wildlife. It's just wonderful to follow you. But one of the things you talk about a lot on your social media in the stories you tell is how both you and Caleb are committed to your farm, your business, but also to supporting other farmers. And you've really made it work with feet both in the production world and in the support and education world. And I'm wondering if you ever feel tension there. Like, my gosh, we had a conversation before we started recording about some lambing issues that were happening just this morning. So how do you balance all of that?
Um, well, I'll start by saying I think there's a little bit of a myth maybe to the idea that it can all be balanced. I think um, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way, but I think sometimes we imagine that somebody else has it all figured out, and we're just the ones struggling with that tension. But I've come to believe that the tension always exists, and it's more about how we manage it, how we live in it, the choices that we make. Farming, especially, we don't have control over so much. The weather and health of our animals things can just happen, and we have no control. All we can handle is our response. And so I think in the balancing of life and off farm work and the farm, that's something too. We're always making choices. So yeah, I think to take a step back into that community piece, when we first started our farm, we really had that mentality that I think a lot of people entering the sphere at the same time we did shared, around independence and being a solo, completely diversified farm, like doing it all of it. We were responsible for having this whole system within our small acreage and our enterprise. And I think we really could have, we were going into burnout phase with that, right? We were doing 2 acres, eventually 5 acres of market farm, plus sheep, plus beef. We were doing wholesale. We were doing CSAs. We were doing farmers markets. We were trying to work with our neighbors and do all of these wonderful things. Everything was wonderful, but it was too many things. It
Mm-hmm.
was just too many things. And we got to a point where it was, a question of our own future health and sanity and wellness, or all of the things. And we just had to make some choices. And we actually went through the holistic management planning structure. We took a course around that and started doing an annual practice of really looking at our goals for our whole lives, not just the farm, and then figuring out how the farm fit into those goals, or if it did, and making adjustments so that we weren't hurting ourselves or our future. And in all of that, one of the big things that came forward was we have so many amazing neighbors and friends who are doing a lot of these things. And rather than us raising hogs, I would love to buy a hog or trade for a hog with one of my amazing friends who does that really, really well and rebuild that community and support each other. And so, there have been years when we've traded lamb for CSA boxes, for example, and the farmers who only have vegetables and no protein are so excited to get lamb. And we're so excited to get those vegetables back now that we're not doing it anymore. And so I think that support system has really been a big piece of success or failure, or, how this all works. And I think ignoring that piece of it really sets us back in a bad way.
I think that makes so much sense. I was talking with someone the other day about work-life balance, and they brought your name up. and,
Uh-oh.
and this person said that you actually create something visual. I don't know if it's every year or every so often, that's like a mission statement that you can see and that is actually beautiful and maybe even framed. Is that the case? Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, it was framed once upon a time. Right now, it's a little out of date and needs some updating. But yeah, so that was part of the holistic management uh, visioning process that we went through. When we first were getting married and moving to the rented farm, we wrote down a list of our goals for our life together and this farm. And they weren't like manage 5 acres of vegetables or, make a $1,000 a week or something really concrete like that. They were really big, expansive goals, like have space in our life for learning and play and family as well as work. And so those goals really, we touched back on them every winter as part of our planning process. And there were a few that you could just tell like they were the rub, as long as we were doing 5 acres of market garden at hand hoe scale, we weren't going to have time to go to the family reunion. They were incompatible for us and the way we were doing things. So we either needed to change our farm operation through mechanization to make that possible for ourselves, or we needed to change the operation itself. And that's largely why we got into the grazing. Part of it was that like I mentioned earlier, had kind of fallen in love with the animals, but there were these bigger goals around biodiversity and around our work-life balance with the farm and not wanting to do annual tillage, that no matter how well we did the vegetables, we weren't really meeting those goals. And so we looked at, well, what are enterprises that would meet those goals? And perennial pasture got us a lot closer. And so we made a very scary choice. We had to take ourselves completely out of the box that we were familiar with, what all of our customers knew us for. A lot of our customers were vegan, and we knew they wouldn't follow us into, a meat business. And so it was scary, but it was important for us to actually meet those life goals.
Wow, that's really an amazing story. So, 2 questions. One, who led you through the holistic management process? Was it a book? Was it a workshop? Was it a person?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a mishmash. So Caleb and I went through the Land Stewardship Project's Farm Beginnings, and they had a series of trainings. They still exist. And actually, many other organizations have picked them up through the Farm Beginnings Collaborative. So you can go online and look for that collaborative and see if there's one near you. But the first session was this Farm Beginnings, where we actually met with a bunch of different experts and we developed a business plan. We did this goal setting process, and it was like holistic management light. Actual holistic management is a very intensive process. It includes grazing plans and pretty intense business plans. And so this was a much lighter weight version of that, but that got us started. And then we continued to kind of learn about that. And after that, we continued to work with what are called farm business management instructors. And so those are available through a few different tech colleges. And we worked with one at Western Tech College, and I think another at Riverland over in Minnesota at one point. But those people would meet with us every year and look at our actual numbers and help us just kind of make some of these bigger decisions. And they would ask us some of the tough questions or talk a little reality to us when we didn't necessarily want to have it. And it was good to have those advocates. But largely, we just kind of set out a spreadsheet of the year on paper, and we wrote on it, this is when we'll be lambing, this is when we'll be harvesting that, and tried to look for those areas that were pinch points. We tried to look at our cash flow that way and think about where things would be stressful and just do our best to make things work for ourselves.
That's really great. Well, it leads into my second question, and that's who have been your mentors? It sounds like Land Stewardship Project, the Farm Beginnings Program, the tech colleges who offer the farm business management classes. Who and what else has been a mentorship situation for you?
Well, I just have to say, I feel so fortunate that I've had so many mentors, and they take so many different forms. I have colleagues who are teaching me about wellness. I have an FSA loan officer who kind of taught us how to navigate that whole system of like government programs in a very meaningful way. And I've had a lot of peer farmers who have just been in conversation with me now, some of them for decade plus, kind of working through this together. It's imperfect, it's messy, and it's nice to have those people who you can just be real with. And certainly our Farmers Union chapter has been a big community peer group for both Caleb and I, folks around the Dunn County area, but also, we connect with some of the other nearby chapters in Barron and Polk and Burnett and Pepin and Pierce. And so there are a lot of like peers who understand these things, and we share resources with each other. I went through the Moses, at the time, now Marble Seed, mentorship program as a mentee. And then we've turned around and now I think we've had 2 or 3 groups of mentors that we've tried to pay it forward to. And I think for me, that's it's important to both see all of the people who are mentoring you and sharing resources with you, and then also think about, how do I keep passing those on? I shouldn't be the recipient of so much good fortune. I should make sure that as much as I feel I know, I can pass it along to other people or give them the breadcrumbs to figure it out themselves, because we've just been so fortunate.
So you mentioned you had a loan officer through FSA who helped you understand and grasp the programs. One of the things we are focused on at Wisconsin Women in Conservation is helping women navigate that United States Department of Agriculture alphabet soup of opportunities and programs. So I'm wondering, on your farm, have you been able to take advantage of any cost share through USDA programs, and what have they been?
Absolutely. And this is one of those areas where I could probably go on for an hour if unchecked. So I'll try and be succinct and invite people to, reach out and ask more questions. But we started by using the loan programs to actually purchase the farm. And we did some kind of creative financing, leveraging FSA as one of our lenders, but not our only lender. And I can, certainly talk a lot more about that in more land access conversations. But it was a very important piece of us actually being able to do everything we do, because without that USDA program, we wouldn't have land and we wouldn't be doing any of this. Shortly after, we also worked with our county conservation groups to start putting in some infrastructure, some fences and different things like that, help a road that was washing out, different little projects around the farm. And then we started moving into NRCS programs. So that's the Natural Resource Conservation Service. And they have a program called EQIP, and they have another one called CSP, the Conservation Stewardship Program. And equip can be used in just so many ways. So we've used equip to put high tunnels up when we were doing vegetables that we now use as lambing sheds. We use them to put down cover crops and do nitrogen management in our vegetable operation. We use them to put up fences and be able to rotationally graze our livestock. We use them to put in pastures in areas that had been abandoned or had been crop fields. Let's see, we use them to put in water lines. I mean, these are just the first couple that have come to mind, but there are a lot of different utilities in those programs. And then after an equip program, you can utilize what's called CSP, and that's like an ongoing support for doing good conservation work. And so, for example, with our rotational grazing, we've been able to sign up for CSP, and there are a couple of different tiers of how often you move your animals. And if you move them more often in the 1 to 3 day range, you get a higher payment for doing that. And you keep track of it on a map. And then at the end of the year, you get a cost share for having done that practice throughout the year. And so we've been able to use some of those programs as we've also been getting up and running to cash flow things around the farm. And also just maybe to help ourselves mentally sometimes, not every day. You don't always want to go out and move the fence. But if you say, if I do it, I will get paid and there's a good reason to do it, beyond my own aspirations, that's helpful, I think, sometimes in the motivation. We also worked with a bunch of different programs, like U.S. Fish and Wildlife had a no-till drill we were able to borrow when we were doing our pasture seedings. There are just so many opportunities out there, and there's so many good organizations that are trying to connect people. So again, we try and pay it forward too, working with those same organizations to do pasture walks or field days and show people how we've leveraged those programs. But I think that money is sitting there, and USDA is going to either spend it on someone doing farming like we are, or they're going to spend it on someone doing the kind of farming that maybe is more problematic for our communities, or they're going to take it away and they're going to spend it on something entirely different and say farmers don't need it. And I think more small and mid-scale farmers and marginalized farmers should be using that money so that they say there's a really good reason to have that money here.
Well, amen, sister. I am so excited to be coming to your field day, which is coming up. June 1, you're having a Wisconsin Women in Conservation field day at Blue Ox Farm in Wheeler. And I imagine we will talk a lot about these programs, but what do you have in store for us? Give us a few highlights.
Yeah, well, the WWIC, Wisconsin Women in Conservation field days start out with kind of a learning circle time for us to get to know each other and really share stories. And I think there will be a lot of great opportunities there to talk about the resources that each of us are needing and what each of us know about. And that's honestly one of my favorite parts of these field days is just having that chance to share with everybody and connect and learn everyone's stories. And then I'll be sharing a little bit about our story more in depth and some of the programs we've used or opportunities we know of, organizations we know of. And then we're going to go for a walk around the farm. I think we also get to have some really yummy food. I was talking to Stephanie the other day, and it sounds like that should be pretty fun for those of you who are epicurious. And then, yeah, we're just going to walk around the pastures, and I'm happy to answer questions and show you what we've been doing. We have 153 acres, and it's not all beautiful, and it's all a work in progress. And it's spring right now, so everything is a little bit wild. But I think it's good to just have that time to be together and show it off and learn from each other.
Well, I'm really excited. I cannot wait. I've never been on your farm, even though I've known you for quite some time. So what I love about these field days, and I don't think it's just me, I think farmers are pretty curious about each other's places.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so much fun to see how other people are solving the problems you have or have come up with enterprises on the farm that you might not have had thought of. So I'm really excited to be there. And I'm so thankful that you are welcoming us to your farm. What kind of advice, you've given a lot of advice already, but if a woman pulled you aside at an event and said, hey, I love what you're doing, I'd love to get into something like that, what are your 5 tips or what's your top pieces of advice that you would give someone like that?
Oh, again, I'll try and limit, but I think one of the first things is just finding a network of people. I think that is absolutely the first thing. And I often point to Farmers Union just because there are chapter structures. There tend to be a lot of, really forward-thinking farmers in a lot of the chapters who are really interested in doing this kind of work and supporting each other. It's just a good structure to kind of get started and maybe go to a potluck or, learn a little bit about what other people are doing in your area. Um, so yeah, that first piece is just find yourself some people and start to get to know them and know that they've got your back and be there for them too. Second piece is I kind of mentioned it earlier, but don't feel like you have to do it all yourself, and you don't have to do it all at once. You can have one thing that happens now and another thing that happens whenever the time is right. It doesn't have to be perfect right away, and to think it has to be perfect right away is probably going to stop you from your long-term goal. So give yourself a lot of grace and take advantage of all the opportunities out there to learn. And I mean, there are just so many pasture walks where you can see how someone else is latching their gate in a unique way, or how they set up their irrigation in an inexpensive way, or I mean, you never know what you're going to learn. It's usually not what the field day is about. It's something that you walk past on their farm and you go, I never thought of that. That is so smart. And so, yeah, between the formal mentorships and formal education opportunities, whether it's, finances or cover crops, or even that kind of next level of just seeing what people are doing. There's a lot to learn, and it's okay to be on a long journey of learning. I don't think you ever get to a point where you know it all.
Well, those are great pieces of advice. One of the things you mentioned was not having to do it all at once. And something that's special about Wisconsin Women in Conservation is we can offer somebody who's interested a professionally prepared conservation plan, which involves a walk around your property with a professional who prepares a plan, like a long-term plan for what can be done to improve conservation on the farm. Do you have anything like that that's been prepared, and how did that go? What does that look like?
Yeah, in order to access those NRCS programs that we use so much, especially in the beginning to get our farm up and running, we had to have a grazing plan. And that had to be done by a professional called a TSP, a technical service provider. And that's a whole thing we don't need to get into. But we did work with a TSP to make a grazing plan. And I would say there were a lot of great things about it that helped us kind of develop an initial vision. I would also say that it's okay for those things to be living documents and change over time, because it's really hard to get it completely right off the bat. And so being flexible, just like the natural world is around us, it's constantly changing, and that's okay too. So yeah, our plans have changed quite a bit in the 10 years that we've been on this land we own now. And not everything about that grazing plan is right, and that's okay. That's just fine. But it gave us a good vision, and it gave us a really good starting off point, and places where we could make those changes.
So, what's your land love story? What does your land look like? Can you describe your special place that you're taking care of?
Yeah, it is a sandy big hill in Wisconsin, the north of the Driftless and just south of the North Woods. So we're kind of in this lovely little wash point between hills and pine trees. And I love to go up our hill and kind of just back over the ridge where you can see out over both sides of our ridge into two areas of a glacial lake that once existed there. And you feel like you're on the top of the world, and you can see hills going out in every direction. And especially this time of year in the early spring, there are just so many different colors of buds and leaves getting started. And you can see, pastures and wetlands and everything going on. And I love to just listen to the birds and feel the wind and notice who's out and about, whether it's foxes or butterflies. But that's really my special place, and we can see it at the field day if you want to hike up my hill.
Well, that sounds amazing. I love to hear people talk about their places because everybody has such a love and it's so different. Everybody's farm is just so different from the next person's. Even if you're on the same ridge, it's going to be really different. Well, I can't wait to see it. And I am so grateful for you and all the work you've done to support other farmers. I love the idea that we don't have to do it all, that by supporting the larger farm community, we get supported too, because then we don't have to grow everything. So thanks for all that you've done over the years to make that happen. And thanks for being with me today. It's been great. It's a beautiful day for planting and doing whatever. So I'm sure it was tough to get changed and get in here. I
That's
hope that your you is going to be okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I look forward to seeing everyone too, and I will have a wonderful day, I'm sure.
And we're going to have a lot of lambs to see when we come because you're having a bunch born. You've been lambing for about a month now, it looks like.
Yeah, we're right at the very end of it.
Perfect. So we'll get to see them, and we'll get to see you. So see you soon, and thanks so much.
All right, thank you. Have a good day.